Okay, this is going to be a homework walkthrough for uh, chapter 9-3. So we're going to start with question 1. Logistics Solutions provides order fulfillment services for .com merchants. The company maintains warehouses that stock items carried by its .com clients. When a client receives an order from a customer, the order is forwarded to Logistics Solutions, which pulls the item from storage, packs it, and ships it to the customer. The company uses a predetermined variable overhead rate based on direct labor hours. In the most recent month, 1,300 items were shipped to customers. Okay, so that's an actual. Sorry, and I said the number wrong. It's 130,000 items shipped to customers using 4,700 direct labor hours. Okay. The company incurred a total of $13,630 in variable overhead costs. 13,630. And so if you notice, this is units, this is hours, and this is money. So make sure you're labeling things correctly to keep things straight. Okay. According to the company standard, 0.03 direct labor hours are required to fulfill an order for one item. So direct labor per item is 0.03, so a portion of an hour. And the variable overhead rate is $2.95 per direct labor hour. So the rate 2.95. Okay. So what is the standard labor hours allowed to ship 130,000 items to customers? That is going to equal the 130,000 items times the direct labor portion of an hour per item. So the actual items times the direct labor per item. Okay. Requirement 2, what is the standard variable overhead cost allowed for 130,000 items? So the standard is going to equal the items times the variable overhead rate per, oh no, I did that wrong. Sorry. I was thinking of something else. So that is going to be, sorry, okay. So that is going to be the standard quantity of hours allowed, right? Because we need it in hours because this is a per hour rate. So it's the answer to number 1 times the variable overhead rate per hour for 11,505. Okay. So now we're getting into spending variance, rate variance, and efficiency variance. So I'm just going to really quick fill in my chart. AH times AR, AH times SR, SH times SR. Okay, so variable overhead, actual hours times actual rate, they gave it to me in a total right here. So this, where did they put it? This 13,630 in variable overhead cost, that actual, they just gave it to me in a total, so I don't need to multiply anything. And sometimes that happens in this first column. So keep an eye on that. So the actual hours, right there, direct labor hours, times the standard variable overhead rate per hour. And then this one, to get SH, If you'll recall, that's what we figured out in required one. It was the items times the direct labor hour per item is SH. And so I'm just going to reference the required one and then multiply that times the standard rate. Okay, so I have my three numbers. So again, if I hadn't figured that out in required one, this number is the actual items. Is that right? Yes. The actual items times the direct labor hours per item turns it into hours and then times it by the standard rate is SH times SR. So sometimes this third one takes three numbers to get to it if we hadn't already figured it out in required one. So now my variable overhead spending variance is going to equal the first one, AH times AR, minus the third one, SH times SR. This is actual, and this is what I thought would happen. And I actually spent more than I thought I would. So that is unfavorable. Okay, variable overhead rate variance, the rate and rate. So it's going to be the first one minus the second one. And the actual rate, this one's the standard. So I actually spent a little bit less than what I had planned. And so that is favorable. And remember, when you're entering these things in, you're entering them all in as positive values, no matter what your negatives come out as, because then you put the labels. So variable overhead efficiency variance, that's going to be AH times SR minus SH times SR. And this is actual, this is standard. What actually happened is more than what I thought should happen. And so that is again unfavorable. So that is question one. Question two. They want to know, let's see, now we're Huron Company produces a commercial cleaning compound known as Zoom. The direct materials and direct labor standards for 1 unit of Zoom are given below. And they give me the direct materials. So standard quantity would be the direct materials, or hours is the direct labor. So that's a portion of an hour, and the direct materials, that's pounds. Standard price per pound or rate per hour, and then standard cost per unit. Okay. So I'm just going to really quickly write down those standards. So mine is 7.3 pounds at a price of 2.8 per pound for a cost of 20.44. And then labor is 0.60 of an hour at $9 an hour for a standard cost of $5.40. Now I know they gave me those numbers, but honestly, if you multiply these across, you could get the same total. But I'm not going to do that. So moving on. Okay. During the most recent month, the following activity was recorded. 16,600 pounds of material were purchased. So here's my actual table. Direct materials purchased, 16,600 pounds were purchased at a cost of $2.50 $2.50 per pound. So just for fun, I'm going to take the pounds times the cost per pound. So there's my total cost for direct material. And this is my actual. Remember, they're telling me this is what happened. All of the materials purchased was used to produce 2,000 units of Zoom. So right here, I'm going to put 2,000 units of Zoom and 1,000 direct labor hours, hours of direct labor time. So 1,000 hours were recorded at a total labor cost of 12,000. So not that I necessarily need to, but I could reverse this around and figure out my rate per hour. That's just the total cost divided by the direct labor hours. Tells me I paid them $12 an hour. Okay, I think I got all the important numbers out. Required one, compute the materials price and quantity variances for the month. So again, I like to fill in the chart and material. Let's see. So for materials, my actual quantity, actual price is that total cost of my direct materials, where I took the quantity times the actual quantity times the actual price. And I got that. So actual quantity of direct materials times the standard price per pound is that. And then my standard quantity. Oh yeah. So to get my SQ, I have to take the actual pounds times the standard price per pound times, oh no, wait, I did it wrong. Nope, do that again. Standard quantity. Oh, that's right. Okay, sorry about that. So I'm going to take my direct material pounds per unit times my price or rate, which actually I could have referenced this cell, but I'm just going to do it in 3 so that you remember sometimes yet it takes a step to get SQ. So quantity per hour, no, quantity, we're talking about materials, pounds per unit times the price per pound. And then I times that. Hold up. First, I'm going to do the quantity per unit times the units. There we go. That's SQ. And then I'm going to times it by the standard cost per pound. Okay, sorry, that took me too many steps to remember the correct order. So again, SQ is the units times the quantity or pounds per unit. And then we times that by SP. So it's the units of Zoom, which they told me in B, times the quantity per direct materials per unit times the price per pound. And this was all given to me up above. Okay, so now I have my 3 numbers. My materials price variance is always the first one and the second one because they both have to do with price. Equals the first one minus the second one, AQ times AP minus AQ times SP. And if you'll remember, I could also do AQ times AP minus SP, but I'm just going to do it straight out like this. Okay, Here's my actual, here's my standard. What actually happened was less than my standard, so that is favorable. I'm gonna fix my, there we go, make that more readable. Actually, I should probably do that to all of this. There we go. Okay. Now they want the materials quantity variance, which again would be AQ times ASP times minus SQ times SP. And again, this is both has SP in it, so it could be SP times AQ minus SQ, but I'm going to do it the long way because I already figured them out. So I would just take this middle number minus the third number, and this is the actual, this is the standard. What actually happened is more than what I thought should happen, and so that is unfavorable. Okay, now we're going to talk about labor. So required to compute the labor rate and efficiency variances for the month. So again, actual hours times actual rates. They actually told me that we paid my labor cost of $12,000. So I can just put that total right there. Oops. I don't need so many zeros. Okay. And then my actual hours equals my actual direct labor hours, which they told me in C, times direct labor standard rate per hour is 9. And then my standard hours times my standard rate. Remember this, to get standard hours, I need to take my units times the direct labor per unit, right? That gives me SH. And then times by the standard rate per hour, because I have to know how many hours before I can times it by that. Okay, so I have my three numbers. Now, labor rate variance is the first one minus the second one. So that equals AH times AR minus AH times SR for 3,000. And if you look at what actually happened compared to the standard, what actually happened was more than what I thought should happen. And so that is unfavorable for $3,000. Labor efficiency variance. Again, that's the middle times or minus, sorry, minus the last one. So that's AH times SR minus SH times SR. And see, this is our actual hours. This is our standard. So what actually happened was less than what we thought was going to happen. And so that is favorable. Okay, so that was question 2. Now, question 3 is a bear, but if you just take it a step at a time, you can understand it. So I'm quickly just going to read through all of these words and I'm going to start pulling out the numbers that matter. And if you look, I made a chart for standard and I made a chart for actual so I don't get confused. Okay, John Fleming, Chief Administrator for Valley View Hospital, is concerned about the cost for tests in the hospital lab. Charges for lab tests are consistently higher at Valley View than at other hospitals and have resulted in many complaints. Also, because of strict regulations on amounts reimbursed for lab tests, payments received from insurance companies and governmental units have not been high enough to cover lab costs. Mr. Fleming has asked you to evaluate costs in the hospital lab for the past month. The following information is available. Okay, A. Two types of tests are performed in the lab, blood tests and smears. During the past month, okay, right there, that tells you this is actual, 600 blood tests. Let's see, actual. See, I'm already confusing myself. 600 blood tests and 2,700 smears, okay, were performed. So that goes into actual. Where was I? So B, small glass plates are used in both types of tests. During the past month, the hospital purchased 13,500 plates. So I'm going to put that right here. At a cost of $38,070. 38070. 1,700 of these plates, I'm going to put that right there for unused, were unused at the end of the month. No plates were on hand at the beginning of the month. So that just means we don't have a beginning balance to worry about. We can just work with the numbers they gave us. Okay, D. During the past month, 1,700 hours of labor time were recorded in the lab. Whoops. Okay, lab hours. 1,700 at a cost of 18,105. Whoops. No typos allowed here, or I'll get the wrong answer. Okay, and D, the lab's variable overhead costs last month totaled 12,410. So 12,000, whoops, another typo. 12,410. Okay, that's all of those numbers. Valley View Hospital has never used standard costs. By searching industry literature, however, you have determined the following nationwide averages for hospital labs. Plates. 3 plates are, okay, so here's my standards, right? These are the standards. 3 plates are required per lab test. So I need 3 plates per test. These plates cost $3 each. So they cost $3 per plate. And then, where was I? And are disposed of after the test is completed. Okay, labor. Each blood test should require 0.6 hours to complete. So blood tests are 0.6 of an hour, so a portion of an hour. And each smear should require 0.30, 0.30 of an hour. So again, those are portions of an hour. This is units, that's plates. Okay. The average cost of this lab time is $11.70 per hour. So lab cost per hour is $11.70. Overhead. Overhead cost is based on direct labor hours. The average rate for variable overhead is $6.80 per hour. I'm going to put that right here. Overhead cost per hour. Okay. So far, so good. Now, what do they want me to figure out? Compute a materials price variance for the plates purchased last month and a materials quantity variance for the plates used. So right there, that's going to tell us there's going to be a difference. So for price variance, we're going to use the actual quantity purchased, right? Because that's what they said right there. And for quantity variance, we're going to use the actual quantity used. And that's your only clue right there, is right there where they say that. Okay, so materials price variance. So the very first thing I'm going to do is, like I did before, I like to fill in all three of these things. So for the actual quantity times the actual price, again, just like I've said before, sometimes they give this as a total. And so they told me that the cost total was 38,070 times the actual price. Anyway, so I don't have to multiply, right? Because they already did that for me. They told me the total cost. So that's what the first pitchfork is. It's the total cost of my actual quantity. Okay. Now for the price variance, which is 1A, right? Or the first one, I guess there's not letters here. I'm going to use the actual quantity purchased. So that is going to be equal to the actual quantity purchased times the standard price per plate. Okay, so the price variance, we're using the actual quantity purchased times the standard cost per plate. Okay, so now I have enough for the materials price variance, and that will just simply equal AQ times AP minus AQ times SP. And if you look, the actual is less than the standard. So this is what I thought would happen, the standard. And what actually happened was less, so that is favorable. Okay. Materials quantity variance. So again, I'm going to take before I do that, well, no, I am. I'm gonna figure out the middle one. So the actual quantity used, which I should have figured out. So I left a little space right here to figure out used, and that is simply the purchased minus the unused, and that equals the used. Okay, so I'm gonna take the actual quantity used times the standard price per plate. Okay. Now, SQ. Remember, SQ is going to be 3 times the number of blood tests and smears done because it takes 3 plates per test. And right now we're just figuring things out per plate. And so to get the standard quantity is going to equal the number of blood tests plus the number of smears. I should have put parentheses, but I didn't. I'm going to put parentheses around that. And times that by the number of plates per test, which was 3. So again, the blood test plus the smears times 3 plates per test. Okay, so that gives me SQ. I'm going to add some more parentheses. I want to do this all in one. So that's SQ. So those three numbers, that is SQ. Now I'm going to multiply that whole total by standard price, which is $3 per plate. Okay, now when I do the materials quantity variance, it's going to be this middle one minus the standard quantity, standard price. And that is, let's see, this is my standard. This is actual. Actual is more than standard. And so that is, whoops, that arrow's in the way. That is unfavorable, right? Because actual is more than what I expected. Okay. So far, so good. We made it through required 1. Required 2, for lab costs in the lab, A, compute the labor rate variance and the labor efficiency variance. Okay. So in 1, we were talking about direct materials, which is the plates. Now we're talking about labor. So actual hours times the actual rate. They gave it to me in a total. They tell me how much my labor costs right there in actual. So I don't have to do any multiplication there on that first one. Okay. I'm talking about labor. So actual hours, which they told me here, times the standard lab cost per hour, which was $11.70. Okay. And then remember, standard hours is going to take a little bit extra. So I'm going to do it right here. So standard hours equals the blood test times how much of an hour the blood test should the standard per hour. I mean, the standard number of, or the standard portion of an hour that it should take for each test. Okay, so that gives me 360 hours for blood test is my standard. And then smears, it is going to be the 27,000 times the portion of an hour it takes for each smear, which was 0.3. So now I can add those two up and it will give me SH, or standard hours. Okay, so now I can do equals standard hours times the standard rate of 1170. Okay, now let's see, what are they actually asking me for? Labor rate variance. So labor rate variance is always, here's rate and rate. So it's the first one minus the second one equals, whoops, 2 equals AH times AR minus AH times SR. That's my rate variance. What actually happened is less than what the standard, what I expected to happen, right? There's the standard. And so this is favorable. And again, you put these all in as positive numbers, regardless of what you're getting negative, positive here. Okay, labor efficiency variance is going to be AH times SR minus SH times SR. And this is my standard hours. This is my actual hours. And so what actually happened was more than my standard. And so that is unfavorable. Okay, so that covers that for A. 2B, in most hospitals, 1/2 of the workers in the lab are senior technicians and 1/2 are assistants. In an effort to reduce costs, Valley View Hospital employs only 1/4 senior technicians and 3/4 assistants. Would you recommend that this policy be continued? So in my mind, senior technicians are going to be better, more experienced, work faster, which they have a labor efficiency variance unfavorable of $6,201. So I think if they want to be reduce prices, they actually should increase their number of senior technicians and decrease their number of assistants because assistants are less experienced and work slower. And so their efficiency is unfavorable. And so the answer is no, based on because labor efficiency variance is already unfavorable and it's adding um, the extra number of assistants could increase that unfavorable labor efficiency, that variance. Okay, now we're going to talk about the variable overhead rate and efficiency variances. And is there any relation? We'll get there in a minute. Okay, 3A. So again, AH times AR for variable overhead, they gave me as a total. So I don't have to multiply there. Actual hours times standard. So the actual, remember, it's based on direct labor hours times the variable overhead standard cost per hour. And then remember SH, we figured this out above, so, and it's based on direct labor hours, so I'm just going to use that number again. The SH times the standard rate of $6.80 per hour. Okay, variable overhead rate variance. This is where our rate is compared. It's the first one minus the second one. AH times AR minus AH times SR. This is my actual, and this is my standard. Actual was more than my standard, and so this is unfavorable. Variable overhead efficiency variance would be the middle minus the third. So equals AH times SR minus SH times SR. And these are my actual hours. These are my standard hours. What actually happened is more than what was standard, what I expected. And so that is, again, unfavorable. 3B, is there any relation between the variable overhead efficiency variance and the labor efficiency variance? This one and this one, and the answer is yes, because variable overhead is based on labor hours, direct labor hours. And so if they're taking more hours than they should, then variable overhead efficiency is going to be unfavorable as well because it is based on those hours. And that is the end of 9-3 homework.